We are bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks, and it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no? See, I keep meeting these people. I mean, just a few days ago, I met this man whom I greatly admire, and he told me that he no longer watches television, he doesn't read newspapers, and he doesn't read magazines. He's completely cut them out of his life because he really does feel that we're living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare now, and that everything that you hear now contributes to turning you into a robot. He said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "New York, yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Why do you think they don't leave?" He said, "I think that New York is the new model where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have the capacity to leave the prison they've made or to even see it as a prison." And he said, "Escape before it's too late." See, actually, for 2 or 3 years now, I've had this very unpleasant feeling that we really should get out. Of course, the problem is where to go, because it seems quite obvious that the whole world is going in the same direction. From now on, there'll simply be all these robots walking around, feeling nothing, thinking nothing. And there'll be nobody left almost to remind them that there once was a species called a human being, with feelings and thoughts, and that history and memory are right now being erased, and soon nobody will really remember that life existed on the planet.
Armor of Truth.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Brad from Carolina YouTube channel and log on armoroftruth.net.
Greetings, everybody. It's Armor of Truth Live, number 149. Let's jump right into the poll question today. It's kind of interesting. Should we call a convention of states? I've got that capitalized because that's a proper noun. That is a thing that's out there. I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. I'll tell you what a convention of states is and who's actually trying to do it right now. But here's the question. Should we call a convention of states to try to create amendments to the Constitution in order to limit the power of the federal government? In other words, to put the federal government back into the box that the Constitution is supposed to be keeping it in. Of course, they've gone rogue. We know that, right? So here's the question. Should we call it? Here are your options. You can say, yes, the nation belongs to the people. You could say, no, it's too late and we have no power. You could say, I don't care. Or you could say, let's go, Brandon. So far, the overwhelming majority of you have said, yes, we should do it. The nation belongs to the people. I'm very encouraged by that number. Very encouraged by that. 21% of you have said, no, it's too late. We have no power. And I certainly understand your position as well. 10% of you have said, I don't care. That one I can't get down with. 8% say, let's go, Brandon. No comment. Just no comment on that. Well, let's go ahead and check out a couple of these comments here. There's Cameron. Cameron Hildebrand says it should definitely be petitioned with our state government in accordance with Article 5 of the Constitution. That's what we're going to talk about today. It really does not seem such effort would be successful. It would be successful because the U.S. Constitution has already been discarded as antiquated nonsense by most people. If this were not the case, then more individuals would take the effort to be familiar with it, right? That's a good point. Yeah. It's not taught in school anymore. Beyond superficially parroting First and Second Amendment rights, only when called to do so by partisan pundits and influencers, right? Cameron's saying, yeah, people use it when it's convenient for them, when they want something. Right, that's a good point. All right, thanks for that, Cameron. Erica says, despite the fact that it's been prophesied that this nation will be destroyed, good things can come of honest people sticking up for themselves and refusing to bend over backwards for tyranny. Prophecy. All right, Living Horizons says we have to assert that we are living men and women. Right? All right. Talking about don't buy into the legal fiction. We're also going to talk about that today. Living Horizon says the powers that be have led us to forget who we are in Christ. They use contracts to take your free will given from the Father. God has created you sovereign in yourself. Now there's an interesting comment. God has created you sovereign in yourself. Interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Is that true? That's what I'm saying. Are we sovereign? Are we autonomous? Knowing this will lead you to true freedom. We've been given all authority through Christ. Wake up, brothers and sisters. Excellent. Thank you for that, Living Horizon. Susie Q says, we should never just give up. That's that 10%, she's saying. We shouldn't be like that 10%. Katie Ray says, yes, indeed. But I could also vote, let's go, Brandon. All right. Michael Tiza in the house says, not real sure countries or nations are even real anymore. All we see is the whole world doing what a few unseen people tell them to do. God won't take these people out. Hopefully someone will, but only if it's what God wants. We are real past conventions and diplomacy. I think that's why it's hard to travel to protect these few people. Michael Tiza, thank you very much for that. Let's go ahead and let's do a little update and see if we got any more here. Yeah, a few more votes just came in. We're at 63% say yes. Make sure we got all the comments up to date here. Griffin Fire says we never had power to start. And if we did, who was to say people will give up their mind control and self-love? All right. There you go. So some very interesting comments. Thank you for that. If you want to vote in this poll, and I encourage you to do it, the link to this poll is pinned to the top of the live chat right now, or you can just navigate to the community tab on the Brad from Carolina YouTube channel. Go vote in this poll, folks. We'll check in here at the middle of the show, and then toward the end we'll come back and see how this poll has turned out today. Should we call a convention of states to limit the power of the federal government? Let us know what you think. All right, and welcome to the show today. It's number 149, Armor of Truth Live. So as a little introduction here, before we get into the convention of states and all that, and the Tyrants variants, perhaps a rain dance. Let me remind you people, you good people out there, if you would like a free Bible and a starter pack of tracts, email us at hello@armoroftruth.net, and in the subject line just say, I want a Bible. Make sure you give us your mailing address. We'll be happy to send that out to you. We have some KJVs around here. We have some ESVs. If you'd rather have an ESV, just let us know. And we'll send you a starter pack of tracts. We'll send you a little King James Companion. If we send you the King James, we'll send you the King James Companion, which is a little glossary of 600 archaic words. It'll help you understand some of the language in there. Also, if you want to reach us, you can mail us the old school way at Armor of Truth, P.O. Box 729, Hudson, North Carolina, 28638. If you want to send in support that way, you can do it as well. Make it check money order payable to Armor of Truth. That would be most helpful. We would really appreciate your help. We're looking to get ourselves funded for next year so we can keep doing this for you. Now, since we're talking about tyrants and variants, I thought it might be interesting if we covered this. Mr. Bill Gates. Some information comes out over the past couple weeks about Bill Gates spending some coin on marketing. Why would he need to do that? Doesn't he have the truth on his side? Isn't he a scientist? Doesn't he identify as a doctor? Well, let's go ahead and look. Let's see what it says here. $319 million to buy influence with media outlets. New documents revealed by the Mint Press News show that billionaire oligarch Bill Gates has given over $300 million to influence various, what Liberate America is calling fake news outlets. I'm just reporting the story. CNN, NBC, NPR, PBS, and The Atlantic are some of the outlets that have received substantial money from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we will be talking about The Atlantic here today. NPR has received grant money totaling over $24 million, while The Guardian has tallied over $12 million as the top recipients of grants from the Gates Foundation. Other places, other media outlets that the Gates Foundation paid include Cascade Public Media, receiving over $10 million. Univision, we've got to get the message out to the Spanish-speaking world as well, receiving nearly $6 million. NBC Universal Media receiving over $4 million. The BBC and CNN receiving over $3.5 million each. And the Texas Tribune and the Financial Times receiving a couple million each. Investigative journalist Tim Schwab has explained how stories that Gates does not want published are suppressed because of these funding considerations. And here are some of the tweets as they came out. Some tweets from Tim Schwab. Months ago, I was asked to be a co-reporter on this story. I declined because the Gates Foundation was a funder of the story, which I knew would make it impossible to rigorously examine Gates' role in what we call COVAX. That is an international story. This story is a case study in the perils of Gates-funded journalism. COVAX has to do with global distribution of the vaccine. Anyway, it says, co-reported by Stat News and TBIJ, the story amplifies a message that Gates had an extremely small role in the failures of this international approach to healthcare. It says this is misleading, false, really, and it hurts the ability of independent journalists to tell the truth. Saying that he had a small role, he had a large role. The story offers useful reporting about the failures in the operation, we'll call it, unaccountable power, missing risk analysis, country club mindset, and it's all true, yet also deeply misleading when placed in a context where Gates' very important role in these failures is obscured. The article doesn't mention Gates until the 83rd paragraph, and it only reports 4 graphs on Gates, including a quote from Gates. Again, this is a story about a failed, how do we talk about these things carefully here? Rollout initiative. You know what we're talking about, right? An outsized role in leading and shaping. Why would these media outlets bury Gates' role in this editorial decision to minimize and obscure the very significant role the Gates Foundation played in the failures of the international vaccine rollout aligns perfectly with TBIJ's funder, the Gates Foundation. Unbelievably, TBIJ did not clearly disclose its financial conflict to its readers. Right? This is what we see all over now. Of course, you just saw the media outlets that Gates has been paying over the last while. They don't tell you that. Well, let's just see. Did you know? When you're watching. Now, some of us. I'm not talking most of you who are here, but some of you who might be watching this for the first time. You haven't paid much attention to these kinds of stories. As you're listening to NPR, and they're giving you advice on healthcare decisions you should make. Were you aware? Were you aware that NPR had received grant money totaling over $24 million from that one foundation who has a stake in the game? If we remember correctly, in December of 2019, I wish it's somewhere on this computer, but I don't have time to grab it right now. We had the tweet from Gates. It says, it'd be a good idea to start investing in jab technology right now. Yeah, so he's invested in it. All right, so, if you happen to watch, what else? BBC, NBC Universal, or CNN, did you know that he was giving millions of dollars to these media outlets to, of course, get the story they want? Obviously, right? So I know. I mean, most of you guys who are here with us, this is, I'm preaching to the choir. But we like to make sure that we make our case solid. Media is owned. The mainstream media is owned and operated by those who have the power. Those who are telling us what to do with our lives. Those who are telling us what we should do with our bodies. Being funded by those who are running the rollout. Is it about health? We have to be very careful about how we talk about it here. So let me remind you that where we speak freely is on our website, where we stream. Usually we stream once a week. We've had a holiday recently, so we're looking to get back on that schedule. Looking for a good day in the week to do our website stream. We'll let you know. We'll let you know as soon as we figure that out. But we do uncensored live streams at armoroftruth.net. Okay, and it looks like this, in case you're wondering. armoroftruth.net. Please visit armoroftruth.net. This is our website. This is our home. This is where we need to be. This is where we will be from now on, Lord willing, of course. Who knows what'll happen? They can turn the lights off at any moment, that's for sure. And we know that on YouTube, that day is coming sooner rather than later. So this is the home. This is where we'll be. You can come here. If you see this right here, this is our playlist of our AoT True Normal series. These are the uncensored live streams. You can also check out the Tracking Dystopia series, where we interview people from around the world and get their on-the-ground, eyewitness, first-person accounts of what it's like right now where they live, with the lockdowns, new order rollout. Check out the Matrix Override series. That's Summer's ongoing testimony. Very interesting. You want to check that out. Bible study series is here as well. And please don't forget to check out the Culture Vault. That's where you'll find all the research articles that Summer gathers. And most of them we cover right here on this show. I have a blog there as well. You can check that out. Please visit the armoroftruth.net website. And this is where we live stream. Away from YouTube. Uncensored, at least for now. Okay, now let's move on to the next story, which is this. Dan Andrews. Premier of Victoria, Australia. This is not really, there's not much to the story here. I just wanted, if you've been with us very long, or you've been paying attention to alternative media anyway, because you don't get this in the mainstream media, Australia is in a totalitarian nightmare right now. And this man is one of the main culprits. I mean, he is devoted and dedicating himself to, well, how can I speak freely about this? Taking away the liberties and freedoms of Aussies. Okay, and here's what, just to give you another example. Here's one of the posts on his site. The way we quarantine and isolate is changing, whatever that means. So here's his. It goes on to say, just this is about isolation. It's about identifying people. I mean, they had army trucks carrying people in Northern Territory. I believe that's where it was, to quarantine camps. Just in the last couple weeks, people are speaking out over there about it. You don't hear about this. You don't hear about this in the mainstream media. People are livid. So the reason I wanted to bring this up was the comments. The comments under these Instagram posts. Well, he says, I know it's a message none of us wants to get. The one tells us we need to get a test and quarantine for 2 weeks. It's stressful and it keeps us away from the things and people we love. But now, because 9 in 10 Victorians have been jabbed, we can safely make some changes to the way we quarantine and isolate. It means less time in ISO, more time getting on with our lives. And of course, we should believe that. Why? This whole thing started with the phrase, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And here we are, 2 years later, with quarantine camps. So anyway, all right, so some of the comments. Here's the first comment on the list there. You can see it, right? It says, so much science. Sven says, I'm just here for the comments. Dan, Enter the Matrix, says, blah, blah, blah. Wombat Stew says, so where's the scientific evidence of these decisions? Where's the proof? Because it looks to me like you magically made up a new disease. Incubation period of 7 days rather than 14. And the new variant is still transmissible between the vax. So are there new studies? So Wombat Stew is simply saying, where's the evidence for all this? It's a fair question, right? I think it is. John Coro 1 says, looking at your behavior, I would be calling you the extremist. No Ideologue says, you're unraveling, Danny. Amtexture says, resign. Alan Taybrook says, you're cooked. So it just goes on and on like this. On and on. So you can feel the love, right? You can feel the love. Just taking a look around the world at what's going on. Also, we have the Omicron variant that's out there now. Or that's what's in the news anyway. And in South Africa, health minister there says these travel bans, the South African health minister, not Brad from Carolina, the South African health minister is saying that the travel bans are unjustified. South African health minister Joe Fa'ala, I'm just making a guess at that, said that these restrictions are unjustified. He slammed other nations for wanting to put blame and ascribed the variant to South Africans rather than working collaboratively to address the situation. The health minister said preliminary studies suggest the variant may be more transmissible due to its genetic composition, but noted that the vaccines are still effective in preventing severe cases. Anyway, the narrative here anyway. Well, what we want to understand from this is it appears anyway that South Africa is catching some blame. Like your people aren't, your vaccine uptake numbers are very low, so it's your fault. It's difficult to talk about this stuff over here, but it does seem interesting, right? That in a place with the lowest percentage of jabbed citizens, it seems that the news of a new variant coming from there, this is elementary. It's difficult to talk about it over here because we know you can't question the narrative here. So we'll just let the health minister say it for himself.
The announcement about this variant and the risk which the scientists were showing was simply to say that this needs to be watched, but there is no indication and any suggestion at this stage that this mutation, this particular variant, will not be able to the severe illness as a result of infection by this particular variant will not be prevented by the vaccine. There is no such evidence. So we want to dispel any notion, as has been bandied by various commentators. We have had even some of the reasons given by some of the commentators from some of the countries which has imposed these bans, that it is as a result of that. But we can assure you that at no stage did the scientists who announced the discovery of this variant say that this particular variant will be resistant to the vaccines which are being utilized. So let me leave it there, because I'm sure members of the media have particular questions, so that we can be able to interact, having made.
Okay, so in short, what we like to do here, we like to analyze the narrative overall. We're not, making comments on what's real and what's not, and it's the narrative. What can we learn from the overall narrative? What can we learn about what might be real, what might be happening, what might be coming around the corner by analyzing the narrative? Well, South Africa has a very low vaccine rate at the moment, and now their economy is being hampered, handicapped with travel restrictions. That's the narrative. Well, that's what's happening. Now, what's really causing that? Things we can't really talk about here on YouTube, but you get the idea, right? If your country isn't following along, if your country isn't dutifully following all the guidelines and getting your citizens to comply, well, then the global order is going to react. This is how a global order is created. Soon there won't be any sovereign nations. This is how it's done. They are strong enough. They are strong enough now to essentially shut down South Africa, for example. So before it gets any deeper on that topic, let's move on to the next one, which is this. Our poll question. Should we call a convention of states to limit the power of the federal government? So far, 54 votes are now in. You can vote in this poll. Follow the link that's pinned to the top of the live chat, or go to the community tab on the Brad from Carolina YouTube channel. Let us know what you think. So far, 54 votes. 67% of you say yes, we should call a convention of states because the nation belongs to us. Almost 20% of you say no, it's too late. 7% don't care. And 7% simply say, let's go, Brandon. Let's get a couple more comments before we move on here, if we have any. There's MJ. MJ says, let's be clear. We, the people, pay the government's wages, and they work for us. Now, that is the truth. When you're actually in a constitutional republic, that is the truth. Tyranny has to be stopped. Agreed. Here in Oz, people seem to think we cannot have an opinion, and they are our overlords. It's very strange times. That is very true, coming from a voice right out of Australia right now, seeing it up close and personal. It is interesting to see how people are all too happy at the moment to just assume that the state has absolute authority over your body and everything else in your life. Sarah Hardridge here says, no, this is a misconception. If we call for a convention, anything could happen, and one thing for sure, courts, the entire Constitution is abolished. Now that's a claim that I understand. That was my first thought on this. If you call a constitutional convention, you're asking for trouble. All right, so let's listen to what's actually possible in it. Anyway, it says there is no proof that we will gain anything by establishing a new constitution. Now, that's not what they're looking for. This concern that she's bringing up is valid, absolutely. Calling a constitutional convention is a different thing. But it's still a very serious matter. She says we must remember that man is faulted, and what we have is an original constitution that needs to be addressed in its origin rather than trying to refigure it. People must share this because even I was confused about it until it was explained to me in depth. These are good points. The fact that we have a constitution that does work, that's my instinct as well. To be very, very careful about this. A constitutional convention is a dangerous thing if, the wrong people are involved. It could be that a convention of states coming together. Let's just put it this way. If a constitutional convention was called, if the wrong people are in there running the thing, well, anything could happen. We don't really need to change our Constitution. Now, given that, what Sarah's concerns, ones that I share, we want to make sure, what are they actually asking for? Is it a full constitutional, a constitutional convention? Now, this is an argument that the late, great William Cooper would make all the time. Say, one day they're going to call for a constitutional convention, and he would always say, don't buy into that. Don't go along with it, because if they do that, they can go in and abolish the Constitution. I'm not sure that's absolutely true. But the door is open, right? We need to educate ourselves on this. All right, so let's educate ourselves on this. Now, I have a source that I am comfortable with, and I'm going to play a piece. It's going to go on for a few minutes, but we want to watch the whole thing from start to finish. This might take 6 or 7 minutes. I'm going to be playing it a little at an increased speed. So let me give you some. I'll get some closed captions on here too, so you can read along with it as well. What is a convention of states? Well, let's look at it. Let's see. Here we go. That'll work. Let's look at it. Let's listen to this piece, and then we'll look at the website. We'll see what we can find out. Now, we're not going to know everything here, but let's listen to the case for what if the states come together and write amendments to the Constitution to put the government back in their box. And the point the commenter made there was good. We already have the Constitution. We already have the box is already built for the government to stay inside. But the question is, how do we get them back in the box? How do we keep them from operating illegally outside the Constitution? Well, let's just see what their answer here is. This is supposedly a grassroots effort. I don't know. You decide for yourself.
Did our founding fathers ever imagine that the federal government could balloon in size and scope as it has in recent years?
As one of the founders said, a government big enough to give you everything you want can take everything you have. And what we see is a growing, expanding government that has taken away our freedoms.
We've seen a trend for years of a growing state, in fact, government at all levels. But a lot of us never thought it could go this fast, this far. It's shocking. And even some liberals are waking up and saying, whoa, this is not what we had in mind.
At the inception of America, the founding fathers recognized the importance of having limited government, hence the reason for having a separation of powers. But today we've seen many in the government attempt to grab more power.
We have checks and balances for a reason. We saw what happens to nations that just have kings who can abuse their power. That's why America's founders went to so much trouble to divide the powers. And their idea was to put most of the power in the hands of the group closest to the people, which was the legislature, and in particular, the House of Representatives.
Presidents, unfortunately, have a history of taking a license with the executive authority and doing all kinds of damage to the United States of America.
The federal government's job is described in our United States Constitution, and the only power given to the federal government is listed in the Constitution. There are 17 specific enumerated powers. That's the jurisdiction, that's the authority of the federal government. Well, they've gone way outside of that. Now we've got all these things like a Department of Agriculture and a Department of Education. Look at what's happening right now across our nation as we have this critical race theory being forced on our children all across the country, and you have a federal Department of Education encouraging this. You have an administration that is actually saying they want boys to be in girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, showers. This is crazy policy, and it's coming from a top-down approach from the federal government.
Many note the extreme government overreach used during the COVID pandemic.
Now, after every crisis, there is this trend, surrender more of your rights and freedoms to the government. They'll take care of everything. The problem is we're fundamentally transforming our form of government from the people ruling themselves back ultimately to a king.
You've got the CDC and the NIH actually micromanaging the healthcare of Americans, mandating vaccines, mandating all kinds of things they do not have the federal authority to do, even doing an eviction moratorium. Now they're into the landlord and tenant contract business. There is no constitutional authority for any of that.
It is clear that the government is careening down a dangerous path, resulting in Americans losing more and more freedoms. And something has to be done. Enter Mark Meckler, founder of Convention of States.
Calling a convention of states is a way to take power back from the federal government and return it to the states and to the people.
Okay, now let me just mention, if you're wanting to do research on this topic, you want to find out where it came from, here's the name you want to research. Here's the gentleman you want to find out about. All right, now let's continue.
So that's really the entire purpose, is to restore self-governance to America. Article 5 of the Constitution provides the methods whereby we amend the Constitution. The first clause says that whenever 2/3 of both houses of Congress propose an amendment, that goes out to the states for ratification. That's how we've always done it, 27 amendments. The second part gives the states the power to do that, and when 2/3 of the states propose to get together in convention, then they can propose amendments to the Constitution, and those go out for the same method of ratification by 3/4 of the states.
It's a three-step.
All right, are we paying attention now? So this is, let's go back a couple steps here. What kind of convention is this?
Ratification. That's how we've always done it, 27 amendments. The second part gives the states the power to do that, and when 2/3 of the states propose...
Okay, so this is a state-initiated, a convention of states. That's what it's called, a convention of states.
Americans losing more and more freedoms. And something has to be done. Enter Mark Meckler, founder of Convention of States.
Calling a convention of states is a way to take power back from the federal government and return it to the states. And
now, so there's a convention of states. Let's listen to the first one.
So that's really the entire purpose, is to restore self-governance to America. Article 5 of the Constitution provides the methods whereby we amend the Constitution. The first clause says that whenever 2/3 of both houses of Congress propose...
Okay, so the first method is when 2/3 of both House and Congress propose the amendment. That might be the one you want to avoid, in my opinion, given the amount of obvious crooks that are in both houses of Congress at the moment. But if the Constitution, if the convention is initiated by the states, this is what this organization is working to do. Now, I'm not saying it's a good thing. We want to understand what's happening here. Where's it coming from? Where does it start from?
Amendment that goes out to the states for ratification. That's how we've always done it, 27 amendments. The second part gives the states the power to do that, and when 2/3 of the states propose to get together in convention, then they can propose amendments to the Constitution, and those go out for the same method of ratification by 3/4 of the states.
It's a three.
Okay, so 3/4 of the states would need to agree on this. Now, here's the process. Three-step process, and the first step is...
Step process. The first step is that 34 states call for the convention. The second step is that at the convention, at least 26 states propose, they say yes to proposing an amendment. Let's say they propose term limits on federal congressmen. And so they take this amendment and then they send it to all 50 states. And if 38 of those 50 states say yes, that amendment now goes into the Constitution. That's how we got 27 amendments to the Constitution.
This provision in Article 5 of the Constitution, giving the states the power to propose amendments, was a genius last-minute addition in the final days of the Constitutional Convention.
So you have constitutional authority, they're way outside of it. How do you get them back inside the box? What George Mason, framer of the Constitution, one of the 55 to give it to us, what he said on September 15th at the very end of the convention is he said, we've got a problem here. We've created a federal government, we've given it certain authority, but what happens when it gets outside that authority? Who puts them back in the box? And the way the Constitution was designed as of that day on September 15th, the only constitutional amendments had to start in Congress, which means the very people that stole authority, that got outside of the boundaries of what they had permission to do, are the only ones that can put themselves back in the box. George Mason said, that's a bad idea. We've got to...
And that is the type of constitutional convention that we were talking about earlier, the one that William Cooper was always warning about. I think we're looking at something different here.
Have a way to come from outside and push them back into the proper box, and it needs to be the people that actually formed the federal government. Who did that? The states. An Article 5 convention is very simply the states saying to the federal government, we need to make some corrections. You've gotten outside of your authority, and we're going to push you back into the box that we designed you to be in. An Article 5 convention is simply designed to propose amendments to the Constitution in order to keep the federal government in check.
Potential amendments could include limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, imposing fiscal restraints, and placing term limits on federal officials.
So we launched the Convention of States project in 2013 and knew it was going to be a long, slow march, but we had no idea how quickly it was going to explode. Today, over 5.2 million people are engaged all across the country. We have folks who are volunteers in every single state legislative district in the nation. I literally can't travel anywhere without meeting people who are part of the Convention of States project today.
The Convention of States is a grassroots movement, and you can play a big part in helping restore freedom in America.
Okay, so it goes on, the rest of this goes on to describe how you can how you can get involved in it. And, here's the website, conventionofstates.com. If you want to check it out for yourself, you can sign the petition if you like. And this website describes everything you've just heard. We won't go into repeating everything that you've just heard. They say yes, they're making progress since around 2013. This project has been spreading like wildfire. Over 3 million supporters nationwide. Petition signers in every state house district across America. Actively working in all 50 states to pass the Convention of States application. And here's a look at how it's going. Passed in one chamber. All the yellow states have passed it in one chamber. The green states have passed the Convention of States resolution. Is that one of your states? And the blue states are states with active legislation coming up this year. As you can see, there's it's Delaware. Let's see, and Connecticut and Rhode Island. Let's see here. What we got here? Here's Maryland, Pennsylvania. Yeah. New York is in the blue. New York has active legislation up this year. But what you can see, California, not interested. Wonder why that is. And so you can check this out for yourself if you like, conventionofstates.com. Now, let's talk about it. Now, let me look at the comments for a second. Let me see what's going on in the comments, because I can feel what people are saying out there, and I understand. I get it. Let's see. Where's Tim? Here's Tim. Here's Tim. Tim Sinclair in the chat. Tim says. Tom Sinclair says the Constitution was null and void when the South voluntarily left the Union, no matter the reason, and the Union went down there and forced them back in by force. Freedom is an illusion. Tim says, let's see, we've got Educated Choice says, I would like to believe in the Constitution, but being Canadian, we up here don't have any guns or Second Amendment. Don't acquiesce to the same predicament. Now, there is some advice for us. Now, let's take those two opinions. There. We got Tom, and Tom, whose opinion I can relate to. I've been there. I understand that. I understand that opinion. It's all, it's null and void. It doesn't matter anymore. And we have to be careful, very careful with that idea. Because we have your Educated Choice from Canada, who's saying, hey, look, ours is gone now. We don't have anything. It's close to not having anything. But my friends, look, all is not lost. If we are so cynical, if we're black-pilled truthers and you just forget it, man. The longer we sit on our butts and point at the thing and call it evil without doing anything, we're just going to sit here and watch it crumble around us. And that's not very heroic at all. I understand the hesitation on things like this. And I'm not telling anybody to get involved in anything. I just want to bring some, hopefully some clarity to this, because within, this channel, this YouTube channel, is just firmly within the boundaries of what is called the truth movement or community. And for better or worse, that's where we are. And so we're talking to a lot of people who have the idea, who have, looked at the information, so to speak, over the years, and have come to the decision that it's all lost, that you can't do anything. You can't. Okay, maybe that's the case, but what if you're wrong? What if, I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's just problem, reaction, solution. This is to get us to react because they already have an outcome ready-made. Perhaps. But at this point, what's the better response? Take your chances by doing nothing? Or, as a Christian who knows that liberty, knows that private property, that bodily autonomy, at least as the state is concerned, are all Christian values, at what point do we get off the couch? At what point do we get off of YouTube and get involved in actually doing something to save our nation? For years, I've been in this for a while. Been in this for a good long while now, and I remember back in the days when I was like a lot of you, where I just felt like, no, they've got control of it, and anything that happens in the media, anything that comes out of anything that looks as funded and produced as the thing we just watched is obviously leading us down the wrong path. And I have to tell you, although your suspicions, are justified, you can't live that way. You can't live that out, because what that position does is it causes you to sit locked and do nothing. Or you decide you're going to go live outside the system, right? Good luck with that. A lot of us have tried that. It's not going to happen. You're not living outside the system. It's not going to happen. You're not doing it. And as Christians, we're not called to go live outside the system. House is on fire. We're running into the house. We're here on a rescue mission, my friends. So anyway, I just wanted to say that about this. Give it a chance. Do what you think. I don't have any stake in that particular organization. I'm just saying, all right, at least somebody's doing something. Somebody's thinking about ways to get control. I don't know whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I don't care which side it is. They have too much power. They're outside of their boundaries, of their constitutional boundaries now, and something needs to be done. And if you believe in the Constitution, even if you don't, why don't you just try believing in it? Because what it says is the nation belongs to us, and there's far more of us than there are of them. So there's that. Now, there's a narrative right now, currently. And it has to do with what we've just seen here, the Convention of States idea. There's a narrative that there's a dangerous conservative mob. They're fascists. They're all Trump supporters. Anybody who doesn't go along with the current administration is just automatically a Q-tard Trump supporter. That's just that's how they label us. It's black or white. And that this movement wants to propel the nation into fascism somehow. It's a mind warp, building fear of anyone who desires to reduce the size of government and squelch the obvious push for this global totalitarianism. How do we stop global totalitarianism? You have to save the United States. Guilt by association is what we're seeing. Guilt by association from every mob out there who is seeking to fundamentally alter or remove America's originally founded purpose of liberty and justice for all. Now, what does it look like? What does it actually look like out there? How are these writers? How is the mainstream really trying to? What are they doing to keep good people, good conservative Christians, from getting involved in this movement? Well, attach anybody who's a part of it to radical movements like Q. But here's the terrifying future of the American right from The Atlantic. An article there. Rachel Bovard is one of the thousands of smart young Americans who flock to Washington each year to make a difference. She's worked in the House and Senate for Republicans Rand Paul, Pat Toomey, Mike Lee. Was listed among the most influential women in Washington under 35. Did a stint at Heritage Foundation. Anyway, one of the ideas, it says here, and like most young people, she has absorbed the dominant ideas of her peer group. One of these ideas she's absorbed is that the conservatives who came before her were insufferably naive. They thought liberals and conservatives both want what's best for America, disagreeing only on how to get there. But that's not true, she believes. And here comes what they're going to call the rhetoric. Woke elites, increasingly the mainstream left of this country, do not want what we want, she told the National Conservatism Conference, which was held earlier this month. What they want is to destroy us. Not only will they use every power at their disposal to achieve their goal, but they've already been doing it for years by dominating every cultural, intellectual, and political institution. And she's right. But what the Atlantic article is going to do here is make it out like that this is, well, these are just religious fanatics for one. They can't be trusted. They're going to propel us into a theocracy. Be fine with me. Christian theocracy anyway. But aside from that, Bovaert has the place rocking at the convention, training her sights on the true enemies, the left-wing elite, which she calls a totalitarian cult of billionaires and bureaucrats of privilege perpetuated by bullying, empowered by the most sophisticated surveillance and communications technologies in history, and limited only by the scruples of people who arrest rape victims' fathers, declare math to be white supremacist, finance ethnic cleansing in Western China, and who partied a mile high on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express. Is any of that false? Is any of that false? Let's look at the claim. The cult of billionaires who are totalitarians. Check. Bureaucrats. Privileged perpetrators. Bullies, yes. Empowered by the most sophisticated surveillance and communications technologies in history. Check, check, check. Limited only by their worldview. She chooses to say the scruples of people, of people who, of the people who they have in their employ, who she says to go around and arrest rape victims. The recent story of the father of the girl who was raped in the restroom at a high school by a transgender man. That's a woman. Was a man who was pretending to be a woman. And anyway, they arrested the father for his actions. But anyway, so this is true as well. Declare math to be white supremacist? Check. Finance ethnic cleansing in Western China? That would be the Uyghur Muslims in China supporting that sort of, genocide. Check. Just a fact. And who partied a mile high on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express? And check. So the article goes on to say, the atmosphere is electric. She's given the best synopsis of national conservatism I've heard at the conference we're attending, and with flair. Progressives pretend to be the oppressed ones, she tells the crowd. But in reality, it's just an old boys club, another frat house for entitled rich kids contrived to perpetuate their unearned privilege. It's skull and bones for gender studies majors. She finishes to a rousing ovation. Can you feel what's coming? She says, when I came down to Florida for the National Conservatism Conference, I was a little concerned I'd get heckled in the hallways or be subjected to the verbal abuse I occasionally get from Trump supporters. Judging by their rhetoric, after all, these are fire breathers, the hardliners, the intellectual sharp edge of the American right. So, now, let's look at another article here. Well, where was it? Here we go. Narrative analysis. Another article from The Atlantic. People with scant illusions about Trump are volunteering to help him execute one of his big lies. If Donald Trump had been supported only by people who affirmatively like him, his attack on American democracy would have never gotten as far as it did. Donald Trump's attack on American democracy. That's how they... Instead, at almost every turn, Trump was helped by people who had little liking for him as a human being or a politician, but assessed that he could be useful for purposes of their own. The latest example, the suddenly red-hot media campaign to endorse Trump's fantasy that he was the victim of a Russian hoax. And now we're back to the narrative. Narrative control. The usual suspects in the pro-Trump media ecosystem will of course endorse and repeat everything Trump says. That's what they'll say about you. They'll say that about me. If you're a Christian, if you're not one of them, they just lump you in with that group. But it's not pro-Trumpers who are leading the latest round of Trump-Russia denialism. The newest round of excuse-making is being sounded from more respectable quarters. So this is it's like a disease that's spreading, they would say. This right-wing mania. With Trump out of office, at least for the time being, they now feel free to subordinate their past concerns about him to other private quarrels with the FBI or mainstream media institutions, on high subscription Substacks, on popular podcasts, even from within prestige media institutions. People with scant illusions about Trump, the man, and the president are nonetheless volunteering to help him execute one of his big lies. The factual record on Trump-Russia, and it goes on. Now we're back to the Trump-Russia. Anyway, I'll give you the synopsis. The factual record on the Trump, according to The Atlantic anyway, the facts on the Trump-Russia scandal has been set forth most authoritatively by the report of the Senate Intelligence Committee, then chaired by Richard Burr, a Republican from North Carolina. I'll reduce the complex details to a very few, agreed upon by virtually everybody. Dating back to 2006, Trump and his companies did tens of millions of dollars of business with Russian individuals and other buyers whose profiles raise responsibility of money laundering. 2013, Trump's pursuit of Russian businesses. Russia. If you're on the progressive left, the enemy is Russia. If you're on the conservative right, the enemy is China. Well, who's right? Who do you follow? Narrative analysis. We just want to try to understand where they're taking the story. There's a lot of propaganda. A lot of garbage out there, folks. And another story out here, right here. Let's pull this one up here for you. This is interesting. Everything must be about race now. If you're mainstream media, not all of it, of course. Some of it is out there to be the opposition, but the inventors of America's most dangerous idea. Freedom was once a rallying cry for justice, but the country's realtors had a better use for it. So what do we have here? Realtors had big incentives for maintaining segregation, having invented it in the early 1900s as a marketing tool for selling homes. They had made segregation central to their business practices. Gene Slater, a senior advisor to federal, state, and local agencies on affordable housing for more than 40 years, is the author of Freedom to Discriminate: How Realtors Conspired to Segregate Housing and Divide America. This has to do with markets. Typically, markets will decide. And when markets are informed by substandard worldviews, by worldviews that aren't founded on truth, well, we have racism in the world because we're fallen creatures. It's not going away. Right? But it's not the original sin. Anyway, this says the inventors of America's most dangerous idea, conservatives in America, have in recent months used the idea of freedom to argue against wearing masks, oppose vaccine, using the idea of freedom. You see, for one group out there who's reporting the news to us today, freedom's just an idea. You know, it's just an idea that's very easily manipulated and changed. You don't really have freedoms. I see that come up a lot in our chat and our comments. Freedom is an illusion. Is that right? No, that's not right. Here's what freedom, let's use the word liberty. Here's what liberty is. Liberty is being willing to exert your God-given rights at any moment, but also willing to accept the consequences for doing it. Now, someone might throw you in jail for exerting your God-given rights. But are you free? Are you free if you do that? I'll tell you what's not free. Sitting on the couch and calling it all bullshit while you don't do anything. They routinely refer to themselves as freedom-loving Americans. Freedom as a cause today belongs almost entirely to the right. This was not always the case. In the early 1960s, civil rights activists invoked freedom as the purpose of their struggle. Martin Luther King Jr. used the word equality once at the March on Washington, but he used the word freedom 20 times. So if we just stand our ground with our black pill and call the government a corporation, which it is, and call freedom, call citizenship slavery, the longer we do that, the more of what we see happening around us will continue to happen. And just don't get me wrong. You have to understand, I am sympathetic to you if you have those ideas. I understand it. I was there too. I get it. But the problem today is inaction. The problem today is armchair experts, not doing anything. Just watching YouTube videos about corporate fictions and this, that, and the other thing, right? Your Sesta KV trust, this money that you're supposed to have because of it's based on your birth certificate that's sitting over in a bank in the Vatican somewhere. I know some of you out there just don't know what in the world I'm talking about now, but there are a few of you who do know what I'm talking about. Look, that stuff is very interesting. It's very seductive to study that and try to find out what's true and what's not. But what did it get you? Did you get access to your Sesta KV trust? Did you get access to that money that's supporting your birth certificate? What did it get you? Where are we today? What happened when all the Q crowd said, trust the plan? What happened? How'd that work out for you? It's time to grow up and get out of the truth movement. Sorry. We've created a fiction, and we've called it society. It's true. Markets are fictions. Government is a fiction, etc., etc. We've even created a fiction called the science. And we're working on the assumptions that these fictions are all true. I'm talking about we as a nation, as a general group. But now that works. That works. Having legal fictions works. It's a way for a society to be organized through the idea of a legal fiction. That works as long as the institution doesn't take the role of absolute authority, which it has. That's when it becomes a problem. Legal fictions work to keep society orderly, and because we are a fallen creation, and we're teeming with fallen creatures who are bent on power and gain, love of mammon. Because of this, because of our fallen condition, we need governments. Because of our fallen condition, we need these legal fictions. However, whenever the state and its institutions assume absolute authority and the people allow it, as we have, liberty and ultimately sanity is lost. One of the most obvious side effects of the rejection of God's law is weak-mindedness, a darkened mind, right? Depravity, a depraved mind, or just flat old insanity. That's what it looks like when God's law is rejected. This is the explanation for why we see a culture so rocked with confusion. Men are women, women are men. And a world so easily fooled by statistics and propaganda. How many are on the death toll today? Suddenly we're all paying attention to how many people die every year. We didn't do that in 2019 or 2018. But suddenly, now that everyone's watching the statistics, it seems more dire. I'll ask you, did any more people die in 2020 than died in 2019? Well, that's an interesting statistic to look up. Apart from a Christian worldview, with its theology and philosophy that works from objective truth, objective truth that emanates from transcendent authority and law which is found in the inerrant, infallible, and sufficient, never-changing Word of God. Without that, men are rudderless, untethered, floating aimlessly with no true purpose beyond survival of the fittest, or survival of the most cunning. Maslow's hierarchy of needs becomes the sacred text. In that limited worldview, the highest realization is transcendence. But it's transcendence found within oneself. Seeking transcendence within a finite creature is foolishness. So again, we see irrationality taking preeminence. Postmodernism's current aloofness toward objective truth has influenced a society modeled around many of these fragile fictions. And the idea that man is sovereign is one of the most dangerous ideas. Man is not sovereign. Man is not autonomous. And the idea, for us to have the idea that we are sovereign, autonomous, that is an idea that's been it's been promoted. We find it out there in the truth movement quite a bit over the past 10, 15 years. You know, the sovereign citizen movement. This is a dangerous idea. It's dangerous because it's not true. It can't be true. God is sovereign over all things in the universe. There's no maverick molecule in the universe if you believe God, if you believe God exists, if you are living in the truth. And so when man starts to think himself sovereign, we get movements like the anarchist movement. It's the libertarian movement gone wild. Anarchy is Satanism, right? We don't need, we're going to reject all authority, including God. Right? Because we don't need the authority. Problem with that is you do. When I use this example with Days of Noah one day, whenever you see examples, stories about when society breaks down, like The Walking Dead, the first thing that happens is groups form, and all of those groups have a leader. Someone has to be in charge, an authority. That is the way God has designed it. All right, so that's the way it works. If we ought to have learned anything at all from the global pandemic, we ought to have learned that our socially agreed upon reality is extremely fragile. It can be shaken and reformed by malevolent forces quite easily. Have we learned any lessons at all over the past 2 years? Have we learned any lessons at all over the past 20 years since 9/11? Have we learned any lessons over the past 100 years of bankers' wars, the Prussian education model, the decline of biblically, theologically sound Christianity? I think we have learned. I think we can show that we've learned a lot. God's sovereignty and righteous judgment upon nations does that. It teaches us. It teaches hard lessons that make men and nations better, more faithful. If we do not apply what we've learned and we continue to assign absolute authority over all areas of our lives to these technocrats, these fallible men who have rejected God, these people, if we keep giving absolute authority to the people, the very ones who are out, for example, fighting for the right to traffic in the sale of fetal body parts, just as this massive abortion/sacrifice industry does. If we continue down that path, then we will surely continue to see judgment on our nation, because God will not be mocked. We have to be aware of where our power can take us. Limited though it is, today we do have a lot of power. But we have to be aware of where that power has brought us to this point and where it could take us. We have to pay close attention to the speed at which our culture is changing, the rate at which technology is advancing, and the degree to which the minds of human beings can now be manipulated, molded, and manacled. The way culture is the way society is moving, I say it that way. The way society is moving today, the speed things are progressing, our pastors literally don't have the time to keep up with every aspect of this hyper-real. They don't have time to keep up with all aspects of this society and shepherd the flock, and while also carrying us through the scriptures verse by verse each week. So we need strong voices. We need people from the body to emerge. Saints who are committed to watching that wall, watching the techno-cult, and providing thoughtful, responsible, biblical commentary to help us think through this tumultuous time and come out with our faith intact. Why is it so important that we have some spokesmen today? Because there are millions of gods available for worship today. There's never been more opportunities for idolatry than there are today. The bride of Christ must be constantly redirected toward the bridegroom. She's being escorted through a world with a new distraction coming every second. And our job is to keep the focus clear, to keep her focused on the goal. In describing his own writing style, C.S. Lewis said this in Collected Letters, quote, "Any manner of theology can now be smuggled into people's minds under cover of romance without their knowing it." Now, he was using that in the positive sense. Basically, the Chronicles of Narnia telling the first movie anyways, telling the story of Christ sacrificing for the sins of his people. But it's also true on the negative. Any manner of theology can now be smuggled into people's minds under cover of romance. They can be seduced into following new gods without their even knowing it. And we've seen that happen. Theology surrounds us today. The problem is there are more gods than ever before. Think about the social justice movement has its gods. Agenda 21, the false environmentalist movement, has its gods. The Pope is out promoting Gaia worship. So what do we do? How do we respond right now? So I want to give you a word now about those of us who don't like to be inconvenienced. Those of us who would rather just watch the story play out on YouTube and hope it doesn't ever touch us. Those days are coming to a close, my friends. A word about those of us who just go along to get along with evil to avoid being inconvenienced. So we need to head over to the scripture for this. So we're in Proverbs 29 here. Fear of a man is a snare. That's where we're starting out today. Proverbs 29, we're starting at verse 23. How do we respond? What do we need to know about our duty? What do we need to know about where we need to be careful? Where does our fear need to be? Verses 23 through 29 through 27. How far are we going here? Through 26. 23 through 26. One's pride will bring him low, but he who is lowly in spirit will obtain honor. The partner of a thief hates his own life. He hears the curse but discloses nothing. Verse 25, the fear of a man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord, Yahweh, is safe. Many seek the face of a ruler, but it's from the Lord that man gets justice. One's pride will bring him low. Pride derives from a root meaning, the word that's pride that's used here, the underlying text, derives from a root meaning to be high, not on weed, but to be physically high. And so it constitutes a precise antithetical parallel of lowly. So here pride means, the opposite of humble. Like Satan, the one who hoped to rise higher through his pride, these will fall. These that you see in the world now, their pride, their new world order will fall. But a humble spirit will obtain honor. He who is lowly in spirit will obtain honor. The humble in spirit will retain honor just as much as God resists the proud. God resists the proud. He also gives grace to the humble. God's gracious blessing to the humble in spirit means they will gain and retain honor. What I'm trying to tell you here is it's your time, Christian, brother or sister. Now is your time. We have the greatest opportunity since the first century to show people who Christians are. There's a false Christianity out there that is really, really bad. We have an opportunity to overcome that because they're going to be afraid. They're going to go along with the system. The more we stand up against what is obviously wrong. In our lowly spirit, with humility, we will stand out. They're all watching you right now, Christians. Those of you who have decided not to go along with vaccine mandates and stuff, they're watching you. They want to know why. Why are you so sure? Verse 24 says, the partner of a thief hates his own life, or he who is a partner with a thief hates his own life. What does this mean? This means to go along to get along. To partner with a thief is to reject wisdom. To go along to get along is to embrace folly. God's law makes no distinction between the thief and the accomplice. The one who's establishing the mandates and the ones who are going along with it. Consenting to sin, receiving the stolen goods, for example, participating in operations known to be nefarious, makes us just as guilty as the thief, or the liar, or the tyrant. Think about this before you start complaining about those people making those crazy mandates. What are you doing about it? Are you resisting? Verse 24, he hears the curse but discloses nothing. This is, he hears the oath. The word oath is also used as curse here. What it means is a person swears to tell the truth, but then when time comes to do it, he says nothing. This describes someone who has befriended a thief, for example, someone who becomes aware of his wrongdoing, but then remains silent, someone who is going along with this global tyrannical takeover, but then when he realizes it's wrong, he just shrinks back. When he hears a call to come forward and give evidence, he says nothing. He's brought a curse down on his own head. The accomplice says he loves truth, but when the time comes to stand for it in the face of discomfort or persecution, or just plain old inconvenience, he says nothing. And he allows the tyrant to prosper. He allows the thief to get away with it. Verse 25, the fear of a man lays a snare. Many people intend good. see it all around us today. Lots of our own family members, loved ones, people all around us intend good, but then they lack the courage to stand for good whenever it might be at their own expense, whenever it might inconvenience them. They're afraid to do the right thing. And people like this, who are afraid to do the right thing, live in bondage to the fear of man. They're far too concerned about what people think, instead of first deferring to the wisdom of God's word and will. Now, this is called integrity, doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. From a biblical worldview, a Christian worldview, that's called integrity. Noah Webster says this about integrity. He says integrity is moral grandeur. The moral grandeur of independent integrity is the sublimest thing in nature. But now this error of being bold in word but weak in deed is a snare that traps many people. We've all fallen into that trap before, afraid to act because you don't want to risk your comfort. The fear of man describes any situation in which one is anxious about not offending someone else. For example, a person might be afraid to stand against unethical actions of a government, a supervisor, or even a family member. So Proverbs 29:25 here instructs us to do what is right even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's unpopular, and trust the outcome to God. Otherwise, you're in bondage. The person who behaves this way, who talks a good game, but when the time comes to really stand up for the truth or to stand up for Christ, well, he thinks he's securing his comfort by avoiding the conflict of standing up for conscience. However, the result is more uncomfortable because of the shame that comes with it. At least if your conscience hasn't been completely annihilated by the world. We need to learn how to endure the world's harsh finger of scorn. It's all out there right now. That's the new law. Shame is the new law today. Saul, Aaron, and Peter are all examples of men who were stained by the fear of man. Examples where sincere men of good outward character, when it came time to act, they denied their God in order to secure their comfort or their sense of autonomy. Charles Spurgeon said it this way: "It was the fear of man that caused Pilate's name to become infamous in the history of the world and of the Church of God, and it will be infamous for all eternity. The fear of man led him to slay the Savior. Take care that it does not lead you to do something of the same kind." Here in verse 25, its second part says, "But it is from the Lord that a man gets justice, but it's he who trusts the Lord will be exalted." People might say, but we're doing this to be safe. We're trying to be safe. We don't want to get sick. We're trying to be safe. They're saying this is about safety. This is about loving your brother. We need to get the shot. We need to wear the mask. We need to follow all of these arbitrary mandates because it's about being safe and loving your brother. But the opposite of fear of man is trusting the Lord. When we trust in Him, we will always be in the safest possible place. Safe in the hand and care of a loving, sovereign God. Loving our neighbor begins with fear of the Lord, as all wisdom and good things do. Walking in faith releases us from the bondage of the fear of man. The one who trusts in himself, or trusts in priests, or perhaps experts, technocrats, and stands on the authority of a man for a guarantee of safety, has no safety. Safety is now the holy grail of government and society. This safety is founded on sand, on a weak, mortal foundation of opinions, and in some cases, it's just founded on lies. But those who trust in God, those who affirm and exalt Jesus Christ as absolute authority for all of your life, all areas of your life, might not always feel happy, and you might be cast to the fringes of society, but you're always safe. Charles Spurgeon said this too. He may not always be singing, but he is safe. He may not always have the joy of full assurance, but he is safe. He may sometimes be distressed, but he is always safe. He may sometimes even doubt his faith, but he is always secure. And verse 26 here says, many seek the face of a ruler, or many seek the ruler's favor. You want to please the government, right? The example here is stating a simple fact. And we see many examples today where all people seem to want is some benefit or some payment or some promise of safety that the government or the expert may give them. Now, this relates to the fear of man we just talked about. When the people depend on the direction of these so-called experts or the favor, when they depend on being in a favorable relationship with their government in order to get security and prosperity, if you're going along with something that's obviously wrong because you want to be able to go to the mall, you want to still be able to go to the grocery store, you want to still be able to go to work if you're just following the arbitrary mandates. You're going to happily present you might not do it happily, but you'll present your papers because you don't want to be inconvenienced. These are the people who end up seeking the ruler's favor in all ways. These are the people who become dependent upon the government for their absolute authority. These people are enslaved. And they're all around us. Some of them are us. Verse 26, second part says, but it is from the Lord that a man gets justice. Anytime someone gives you the word justice with a qualifying word in front of it, something's wrong. They got something up their sleeve, like social justice or whatever. Justice is justice. No need to qualify. When we depend upon man for our justice, our security, or our prosperity, we'll always be disappointed. Such justice and its benefits come from the Lord. God is the one who sets up kings and all authorities. If the ruler does give out justice, then he does so as God's agent. But if that ruler acts against God's justice, well, then judgment comes. And I think that's where we are today. Judgment. Judgment is on this nation. And one of the most obvious effects of that, how can we tell that judgment is on the nation right now? Well, it's the depravity that we see all around us. The exalting of depravity. The darkened mindset that we see all around us. God gives the unrighteous over to their desires, Romans chapter 1, and we can now see very clearly what it looks like on a broad scale when God does this, when God gives people over to the desires of their heart. Now, the message here is not that we should never seek justice from or that we should never obey authorities. We're commanded to do that. But our full faith must be in God and Jesus Christ as the King of Kings. Must always affirm where the authorities get their authority and obey Him first. Well, I've said it here many times that the current global movement for full spectrum dominance, right from the neuron out to the planet itself, is a religious movement. We know that. We've covered that here quite a lot lately. It's a religious movement. It poses as though it is a rational and objective humanist movement, though. They market their move for dominance, their push for dominance, global control. They market it as though that it's structured for the common good. That's what we're told. And when we go along with these mandates, when we go along with the climate change stuff, it's for the common good. But their policies describe a movement that defers to the needs of nature and for the good of the planet. So what's this about? Is this a humanist movement, or is this a movement for the planet? But of course, we see the truth when we look at their actions. Their actions expose the same greed and addiction to mammon and glory that Belshazzar had, or a Roman emperor. And those pagan rulers of the past, just like them, this new world order is a faith-based movement. And it's cleverly incorporated elements of world religions to push forward its message. In other words, the global tyrants are hitting us left and right with morality claims. And they're rewarding those who go along to get along, and penalizing, even ostracizing, those of us who question their facts or methods. Now, in our coverage here of Pope Francis and his promotion of Gaia worship, which is simply just the promoting and the pushing of Agenda 21/2030, the false environmentalist movement. And his boldly announcing that even the pagans of South America are part of the body of Christ, and they could teach us a thing or two about God. Well, in doing that, we identified something called syncretism that was evident in his messages. And it's everywhere today. The global climate change movement is a syncretistic religious movement. So it's good to expose it. It's good to expose it. It's good to learn about and explain the dangers of it to people. We need to do that. We need to understand it. So I want to share with you here a piece from, from Joe Boot. Let me get a picture of him so you can know who he is. He's a pastor, author, theologian in Canada, Toronto, I believe. And he's got something called the Ezra Institute. Yeah, there we go. That's not a great picture, but that'll do for right now. There's the old video we did a few days ago. That's weird. Yeah, just bear with me for a second. I can get that thing up here. I don't know why that's showing right now. That's weird. That's when we did the video on Travis Scott a couple weeks ago. Anyway, Joseph Boot from the Ezra Institute. I don't know what's going on with my system right now, but he says this: in search of syncretism. He says it's common to hear in our time that there are many paths to God. Right? There's gods everywhere now, little g gods all over the place. Many roads to enlightenment, right? And many routes to spiritual fulfillment. We even hear this from professing Christians. We hear it from the Pope. In fact, according to the Christian Post, North America, 1 in 3 millennial, quote-unquote, evangelicals do not believe Jesus is the only way to God. 1 in 3. That would be 33%. The emergent church movement, which is less a topic of conversation today because it has gone mainstream, and wealthy white Protestantism, preaches a religion-less and creedless Christianity favoring social justice, symbols, and esoteric experience. That includes prayers to God as mother. I told you, right? Mainstream Christianity out there today is bad. So we need to be speaking boldly. Unsurprisingly, running parallel to this, we find that the modern Western state is keen to sponsor this freedom of worship. Of course it is. Not freedom of religion for the public square. And the state welcomes what it calls diversity, multiculturalism, toleration, and the quote-unquote equal contributions of all religions to the tapestry of the social, cultural, and political fabric. Now, equal in quotes there because obviously the biblical Christian worldview, that's not welcome. In short, there are many ways up the mountain of spiritual truth, and they all lead to God, right? That's the claim. The first obvious problem with such a conviction is the pretended location of the observer of this religious phenomenon. Where would one need to be located to know that all paths on a mountain lead to the top? We're all in the same position, right? The only location that would allow such a perspective is to be high above the mountain. So the humble assertion of modern religious syncretism amounts to an objective claim to an absolute divine perspective without special revelation from the living God. In other words, it's false. To put it another way, if all beliefs, spiritualities, and worldviews of the world are akin to this allegory of a blindfolded people all feeling a different part of an elephant and insisting that their description of what they feel is the only true one, since one feels a tusk, another the trunk, and another the tail, then clearly all religions, in fact, are feeling the one divine truth. Right? This is one of the arguments for ecumenism or syncretism, whichever way you want to look at it. But it's just that we're all seeing it from different perspectives. This is what the Pope says. We're all worshiping the same God, just from different perspectives. This is what the climate change movement is doing. Right? We all want the same thing. We're all coming from these various ideologies, but we all want the same. We all have the same God. It's Gaia. This would seem for some to establish the truth of pluralism or syncretism. I think pluralism is a better word than ecumenism. I used a minute ago. Pluralism is the better word. That's what Joe Booch used here. But in what epistemic position does the teller of this story need to be? Clearly, the religious syncretist believes he occupies a position of true objectivity, possessing absolute knowledge without any blindfold at all. As such, this approach to religion not only dashes it to pieces, the real and historical claims of the biblical faith and of other historical faiths as well, by relativizing them, but it also presupposes an absolute divine perspective on truth for the syncretist. Right? In essence here, everyone out there who's telling you that their truth is true, anyone who's out, as you, brothers and sisters in Christ, are being called out for being a weirdo today. When they're saying that your faith is extreme, just remember, the person calling you out also has a worldview, and they also think they have absolute truth. Somebody's right and somebody's wrong. This is what we've lost. In our culture today, everyone's right. It's your truth. This actually constitutes the basic claim of contemporary religious pluralism, that pluralistic man has a divine perspective because he is divine, and is implicit in all efforts at promoting religious syncretism, which urge that we all just get along. Just go along to get along, right? You know, Big Brother has your best interest at heart. There is inherent in this goal a shift of the locus, the situation, the position of revelation and authority from God to man, right? That's what we've been talking about for weeks now. Absolute authority has been given to man, from the people, in other words. We've rejected God, so we've given Joe Biden absolute authority over our lives. How does that feel? As one cultural theologian said it, for humanism, or paganism, man's religious consciousness and man's psychology is the real source of religious knowledge and revelation. The true word comes out of man, and therefore man's experience needs to be developed. Religion then ceases to be, thus saith the Lord, the word of God, but rather becomes, thus say I, the word according to me. And this cultural motive that has deeply affected the church shouldn't surprise us. Human beings, having been made in the image of God and in terms of His purpose, even when they rebel against God in religious revolution, cannot help but represent God's purpose in a deformed fashion. This is what we need to realize about ourselves. We're all bearing the image of God. It's just distorted because of our fallen nature. We need to know that about ourselves. As a result, humanity seeks to create paradise, heaven on earth. Increase in knowledge and exercise dominion in each area of life, but without God being involved. We want heaven, but we don't want God to be there. Particular effort is put forward since man is a religious creature, homo religioso. All of us, throughout history. The most common thing you can see about man all the way through history is that mankind is religious right from the start. It's our nature. Particular effort is put forward since man is a religious creature to find religious unity as a prelude to socio-political unity apart from the Word of God. We want the religious experience. We want unity, but we don't want God. We don't need that. We don't want the judgment. However, true religion in biblical faith is God-centered, not man-centered. That's the difference between the creature and the Creator. Worshipping the creature is ridiculous. It's foolishness. As the psalmist makes clear, Psalm 115, not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness. Why should the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in the heavens. He does all that He pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see. They have ears, but do not hear, noses, but do not smell. They have hands, but do not feel, feet, but do not walk, and they do not make a sound in their throat. Those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them, O Israel. Trust the Lord. He is their help and their shield. Psalm 115. Now what's really interesting about that at the end here, those who follow their idols become like their idols. Right? We're following the science. We're following the experts. You're following your favorite personality. You become like them. In humanistic or pagan religions, the purpose of the gods is uniformly to please man. Right? That's the goal of all the amplified humanity type gods that we see out there from history and currently. The goal is to please man. In biblical faith, our purpose is to please and glorify God. In the Christian view, the all-personal and all-relational God speaks an infallible word with binding authority. Whereas in religious syncretism, the religion of the world today, the mind, idea, or experience of man manifests the divine reality. The first view means concrete historical revelation in history and the building of the kingdom and reign of God on earth as it is in heaven, whereas syncretistic mystery religion leads to the lifeless, meaningless blankness described in Psalm 115. as one theologian accurately stated it. In his religious quest, the humanist refuses to look beyond himself for his God. The more he intensifies his quest, the more he becomes like the idols described by the psalmist. Speechless, mindless, and senseless. Not surprisingly, the heart of mysticism is the same. Speechless, mindless, and senseless experience. The mystic calls for the exclusion of the external world, doctrine, revelation, and outer experience, for total concentration on an inward blankness. The Hindu mystic declares, "Thou art that." In other words, the mystic is himself one with the ultimate power. In fact, he is the ultimate power. So if man speaks the word of truth from his own consciousness, the new revelation, then he must also have the power to fulfill that word, that new word. As such, interfaith syncretistic advocates of mystery religion typically believe that they can overcome war and hatred and inaugurate world peace, save the world from climate change, as a new and through a new global religious order. This kind of pluralism and inclusivism has so invaded the contemporary church that many young evangelicals think that Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, and Buddha have much to teach Christians, as the Pope also thinks today. Now, in this article, Joe Boot has said, in this article, as it goes on, he goes on to trace the original source of pagan mystery religion and argue that it is inescapably present in the interfaith syncretistic urge of our culture, both inside and outside the church. And as he does so, he gives great insight as to why it is that today we worship the state, we worship whatever God is thrown up, whatever idol that Joe Biden decides to build tomorrow and put up there on the news, people are going to follow it. If the idol is the science, people are going to follow this thing called the science, whatever that is. If the earth is the idol, if the thing to be worshipped is the earth, man can be convinced to worship it. And we'll finish it up with this piece here today for you. Psalm 33, starting at verses 4 and 5. For the word of the Lord is upright, and all his work is done in faithfulness. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the loving kindness of the Lord. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. He gathers the waters of the sea together as a heap. He lays up the deeps in the storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. The Lord nullifies the counsel of the nations. He frustrates the plans of people. The counsel of the Lord stands forever. The plans of his heart from generation to generation. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom he has chosen for his own inheritance. Acts 17:26 says this. The point is, God is still in control. Let's not get caught up sitting on our couches thinking that it's all lost. Don't get so enamored with what you think Bible prophecy is saying that you find yourself sitting and waiting for it to happen. Because that's not your command. Your command is the Great Commission. That's to take the gospel to every creature in the world. Acts 17:26 says, "And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation." The New World Order will fall. You can count on it. When? I don't know. But it will. Isaiah 14:26. "This is the plan devised against the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out against all the nations." Isaiah 2, verse 4. "And he," that is God, "will judge between the nations and will render decisions for many peoples, and they will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war." This is telling me that it gets better. Is postmillennialism true? Thank you for being here with us, folks. God bless you. We'll, Lord willing, we'll see you again on Thursday for our show then.
Armor of Truth, live. Faith is resistance.
I'm not against technology, Doctor. I'm against the men who deify it at the expense of human truth. I'm against the men who deify it at the expense of human truth.